This podcast is made possible by you, the supporters of WPLN and WNXP, Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's May 5th, 2025. Happy Cinco de Mayo. On this day in 1947, Vanderbilt alum and professor Robert Penn Warren won the Pulitzer Prize for his novel, All the King's Men. It was the story of a man from a small southern town who became governor on a platform of idealism, reform, and sticking up for the little guy, only to be corrupted by power, using bribery and intimidation to get his way. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. The protagonist of Warren's novel, a character named Willie Stark, was loosely based on a real politician of the time, Louisiana Governor Huey P. Long. Now, Warren wasn't from Louisiana. He grew up in Guthrie, Kentucky, and went to high school in Clarksville. And for most of the time that Long was building his power base in Louisiana's small towns, Warren was here in Nashville, studying at Vanderbilt. But at Vanderbilt, Warren found his niche as one of the fugitives, a group of writers and poets who met a couple of times a month in the home of one of their professors to talk about their craft, but also philosophy and society and the big and driving ideas that they wanted their work to be about. At the time that he was involved, the group was especially interested in the ideals of small southern farming communities, like the one where he grew up, and the ones that Huey P. Long was courting in Louisiana. The agrarian arm of the fugitives at Vanderbilt saw those communities and their ideals as the moral center of the nation. Long saw them as an opportunity to build a foundation of populist support that could catapult him past the existing power structure that was firmly rooted in the halls of his state capital. So is it any wonder that Robert Penn Warren ended up fascinated and repulsed by Long, to the point that he chose to essentially perform a psychological dissection of him in the form of what some consider to be a great American novel? Long was excellent at getting a crowd riled up. He was a traveling salesman as a young adult, and he knew how to reel in a customer. He regularly mocked his political opponents in the rallies that he held all over the state. Once he became governor, he wasted no time in upending pretty much everything he could, from reorganizing the bureaucratic org chart to building an all-new state capitol building, one that, quite honestly, has to be seen to be believed. I visited it a couple of years ago when I was passing through Baton Rouge. And maybe this is rude of me to say, but my first thought was just how phallic it is. And it's surrounded by manicured park, so the closest thing to it, at the end of a dramatically long walkway, lined right up with the oddly tall tower portion of the building, is a statue of the man himself, Huey P. Long, and his grave. The dude had an outsized ego, is what I'm saying. He was larger than life, and he wanted the state government to match him in every way. And to some extent, he did it, right up until he was assassinated. In the last few years, there have been a tremendous number of think pieces about the similarities between Long and Donald Trump. Their platforms are pretty different, but there are a ton of similarities in their tactics and their strategy, their fundamental appeal to the voters who like them, and the way they insert their own personalities into the way they carry out their positions. As a Vanderbilt student, Warren watched the rise of Long from afar, taking it all in from his perspective of a boy from a farming town and as one of the deep-thinking fugitives. He grew concerned about the way the politicians seemed to be taking advantage of small-town Southerners. Warren saw through the bravado and identified the ways that Long was being twisted into a crook and a bully. And he poured that analysis into a work of fiction that contained a tremendous amount of uncomfortable truth. And I wonder, who's watching with that same eye now? Who's going to write the story that uses fiction to make sense of our time and what's happening in this moment? To be fair, it may take a while yet. Huey P. Long was in the grave for 12 years before All the King's Men won that Pulitzer. In just a few minutes, a deep dive into the recent Biscuits and Banjo Festival. That's coming up after the newscast.
On On This Is Nashville, we're taking a journey into the identity of this place we call home. The old and the new, the glitzy and the gritty, the monumental and the human. What makes Nashville tick? What makes it unique? And where are we headed as a city? We're going deeper on the day's news, bringing you dynamic conversations and taking you with us out into the community. Join us weekdays at noon. This is Nashville.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Numerous drivers in Nashville were taken into custody by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, over the weekend, sparking outrage from activists and local politicians. WPLN's Miriam reports the raid targeted areas of South Nashville where many immigrants live.
Eyewitnesses reported that ICE worked with the Tennessee Highway Patrol to detain several drivers along Murfreesboro Pike, Nolensville Pike, and Antioch Pike on Saturday, including Uber drivers and mothers with young children who were allegedly left in vehicles by themselves. Activists, local officials, and family members of those detained gathered outside Nashville's ICE office on Sunday. One speaker tells the crowd not to give up.
For all the families who are here, all the families who are affected by this, I want to say I'm sorry, but this is not over. We'll continue to fight for every single one of you. You are not alone.
Nashville's ICE office did not respond to WPLN's request for comment. The mayor's office decried the arrests, saying that they further erode trust between law enforcement and the community. Mariana Bacallao, WPLN News.
Authorities in Tennessee have released video of a 2022 traffic stop involving Kilmar Abrego Garcia, whose erroneous deportation to El Salvador sparked criticism of U.S. immigration policy. The body camera footage shows a calm and friendly exchange between officers with the Tennessee Highway Patrol and Abrego Garcia. He was pulled over for speeding in a vehicle with 8 passengers and said they'd been working in Missouri. Abrego Garcia was never charged with a crime, and the officers allowed him to drive on with only a warning about an expired driver's license. 6 international students at Middle Tennessee State University have had their legal status restored. This comes after thousands of students and recent graduates across the country have had their status revoked in the Student Exchange Visitor Program. It's unclear if the 6 Middle Tennessee students can now attend classes and participate in campus activities because legal status and visas are 2 different things. Even though Homeland Security reactivated the records, the State Department has revoked some entry visas. That means international students who are currently overseas may still not be able to enter the U.S. Memphis officers used unnecessary and excessive force in the fatal beating of Tyree Nichols. That's the testimony of a police training expert who took the stand Saturday in the trial of 3 former Memphis officers who have pleaded not guilty to state charges, including second-degree murder. They already face the prospect of years in prison after they were convicted of federal charges last year. Tennessee has suddenly lost hundreds of millions of dollars as the federal government cancels funding already promised to the state. WPLN's Catherine Sweeney reports recent reactions from elected officials differ sharply.
It's unclear how much money the state is losing and how the state will implement the rollbacks. There have been cuts to agriculture and education, and when the Department of Health lost nearly $180 million of infectious disease funding, officials refused to explain what effect that will have. Metro Nashville officials announced when they got a cut to the same grant, it triggered layoffs, canceled measles vaccine clinics, and shut down a lab. Governor Bill Lee said the freezes weren't causing problems, but creating efficiency.
Most Americans believe that federal government's too big and should be cut. The particulars about how that's done, obviously, it's up to those in the federal government, and we will be a partner with the federal government in making those adjustments.
The response coming out of Nashville sounds a bit different.
We'll see you in court.
That's Mayor Freddie O'Connell, who said the city has lost a reliable partner in the federal government. Metro has already filed 2 lawsuits over grant cancellations. Catherine Sweeney, WPLN News.
A Nashville high school student who fatally shot a classmate before killing himself in January was on probation after threatening a student with a box cutter 3 months earlier. That's according to juvenile court files released last week. The records show that Solomon Henderson, who was 17 at the time, was charged with carrying a weapon on school property and reckless endangerment after a confrontation in October. 2 months later, he brought a gun to school and fatally shot 16-year-old Jocelyn Correa Escalante and then himself. Police have said the gunfire may have been random, not targeting anyone in particular. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Over the last year, Cowboy Carter's chart success and Grammy wins have drawn broad attention to a phenomenon that's older and wider ranging, of many Black artists making roots in country music. And just this past weekend, a number of them gathered for the Biscuits and Banjos Festival in North Carolina. Our senior music writer, Julie Height, went to take it all in, and she's here with me now. Hi, Julie.
Hey, Nina.
So, does Beyonce's country album have anything to do with the lineup of Black country roots and folk performers at Biscuits and Banjos?
Yes, absolutely, because the festival was organized by the artist Rhiannon Giddens, who was the banjo player that you hear on Texas Hold'em. But in other ways, the festival was really fleshing out and putting on display a completely different world, because while Cowboy Carter did draw attention to the history of Black country music in a lot of ways, it also really wound up putting the focus on the mainstream country music industry and its historic and contemporary exclusion of Black voices. So Biscuits and Banjos was really spotlighting music communities and scenes that operate completely outside of that, or at least partially outside of that. The festival was literally a space that they had created on their own.
Aside from that talk about Black country that has bubbled up into the widespread conversation over the last year or so, is there any other significance to the timing of this festival?
It is, in fact, the 20th anniversary of the Black Banjo Gathering, which happened at Appalachian State. That was a place where musicians and scholars came together. They were talking about the African roots of the instrument we came to know as the banjo. They were playing music together and sharing. And that was where the Carolina Chocolate Drops, the musicians that would form that band, Rhiannon Giddens, Justin Robinson, and Dom Flemons, met. That became such a pivotal and influential thing, because then they were this young Black string band out there making music, entertaining people, becoming popular, and they kind of brought the forgotten and erased lineage of Black string bands back to life for people and started influencing so many other young pickers that have come along since then. And they are not the only ones. It's been 20 years of this movement building momentum and building its own community.
So there is this momentum, there is this history, but is there something unusual about Black folks who make this music being able to take this kind of opportunity to kind of come together this way?
It's something that the world has not really witnessed, because in the past, in all of these other eras where there have been Black practitioners of country and folk and roots and string band music, those artists, those performers have kind of existed in isolation, and they haven't been looked at as central to the story or the lineage of country or roots music. All of that has been changed, has been transformed by these artists that are active now and have been active over the last 20 years. They have been not only out there performing, building their own careers, but they've had to do really multifaceted work. Not only invested in building their own careers, but also in educating people, because they had continually gotten asked where they fit. They've done the work of educating people on what's been whitewashed about country music history and the roots of the banjo. And they've also been working as advocates and activists on their own behalf, but also their fellow artists and the descendants that are coming along after them. It's kind of the culmination of all of that work that you get to see and experience at something like Biscuits and Banjos.
Now, Julie, I know you are no stranger to a music festival. How did this one compare to others that you've attended?
I mean, there were a lot of the usual festival things. Like I had to go get my wristband and that would get me into certain places and, had to consult the schedule that listed everyone I wanted to see that were all playing at the same time. But there were so many things that made it really feel different because I was walking around, I was running into artists and scholars, and there was this feeling, there was this ongoing conversation about we are in the midst of something historical. That feeling was there even then. The first morning that I showed up at the festival, I ran into an artist who wasn't even scheduled to play, wasn't even officially on the lineup, Miko Marks, and she had flown across the country simply because it mattered so much to her to be there with her fellow artists that she has come to call friends. And that is a really unique and significant thing. Just being able to be together and not have to explain themselves and to not be the sideline or the tokenized presence at a festival, but to be the main event.
That sounds kind of like a family reunion, maybe the first one.
Yeah, exactly. And the hope is that it won't be the last.
Well, Julie Height, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. Thanks so much to all of you who have left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. A little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.